We are at war with Russia. Or perhaps more correctly, we have lost a war with Russia without a battle. We are no longer a sovereign nation. We are no longer a democracy. We are no longer a free people. We are the victims of a bloodless coup. So far, a bloodless coup engineered by Russia with, at best, the traitorous indifference of the Republican Party and Donald John Trump, a man who, to borrow a phrase from another December long ago, will live in infamy. In 5 weeks' time, unless desperate measures are taken, we will hand over the government to a man who lost the popular vote.
Allegations of Russian interference in the U.S. election swirled throughout the campaign. A CIA report claims that Russian operatives hacked into Democratic Party emails and passed them on to WikiLeaks in an attempt to help Donald Trump win the presidency and hurt the chances of the Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton.
Former UK Ambassador Craig Murray said that he met the DNC hacker. He's a DC insider. He's not Russian. And he's calling bull on this whole assertion that the mainstream media has been saying for weeks on end that Russia hacked the DNC all in an effort to help Donald Trump win the presidency. Now, this is what Ambassador Murray had to say. He said, "I've met the person who leaked them. They're certainly not Russian. It's an insider." He also points out that the DNC emails were leaked, not hacked, by this insider, who most likely was upset at Clinton and the DNC rigging the primary against Bernie Sanders. That falls in lockstep with any rational thought. And the fact that our own CIA, FBI, and National Director of Intelligence have conducted their investigation and they're all saying, look, we believe the Russians hacked into our system, it's total nonsense and bull. There is a giant conspiracy going on right now, but that would be the conspiracy. Now, this is the same CIA that told us that we had weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which of course, then we invaded Iraq and toppled Saddam Hussein. The information that we're getting, we need to question it, and specifically these baloney claims that Russia hacked into our system. Where's the proof? You know, it's weird that the mainstream media is just running with it. No proof needed, actually, as long as, you know, you've got government officials that are saying it. We have a clear evidence here, this one ambassador who has credibility, and he's saying, look, I met the leaker. They're simply not Russian. He's calling bull on the whole thing.
The report has not been made public, but some U.S. senators were briefed on the intelligence earlier this week.
It said essentially three things. It said the Russians are behind this. Number two, the Russians are leaking it. Number three, it is intended to influence or interfere with our elections. And number four, it was approved at the highest level of the Russian government. That is, I find it pretty astounding.
The White House says there's no evidence of any cyber attacks or hacking on Election Day that might have changed the vote tally or election results. Donald Trump's transition team slammed the inquiry, referencing faulty intelligence that helped lead the U.S. into war in Iraq more than a decade ago. In a statement, the transition team writes this, quote, "These are the same people that said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. It's now time to move on and, quote, make America great again," using a line from his campaign there. The U.S. has not publicly released any of the report or any direct evidence of Russian interference in the U.S. election. According to a U.S. intelligence source quoted by the Washington Post, the CIA does not have evidence directly linking the alleged hacking to the Kremlin. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange says the Russian government was not the source of the emails, but he won't say who the source was. Russia has long denied having any role in the U.S. election. The Russian President Vladimir Putin commented before the U.S. election.
Does anyone seriously think Russia can somehow influence the choice of the U.S. people? Is the U.S. some kind of banana republic? The United States is a great power. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Russia has called on the U.S. to make any evidence public.
There is no hard, solid evidence of any Russian hacking here. There's a bunch of generic, fluffy statements that are coming from just some intelligence agencies. What we're seeing is personality bashing. They're going after Paul Manafort. They're going after Tillerson. They're going after anybody who's been associated with Donald Trump on an international level in an effort to discredit the results of this election and take it to the Electoral College to possibly throw a rope or some kind of savior to Hillary Clinton that she might be president. It's a fool's errand. I'm disappointed that the White House is going down such a flimsy road.
Yeah, well, this afternoon, Ed, they also went after Michael Flynn, didn't they? Trump's pick for his national security advisor. Let's just listen to what was said.
It was the president-elect who had a national security advisor on the campaign that had been a paid contributor to RT, the Russian propaganda outlet.
That's right, Ed, the Russian propaganda channel. Look, Flynn's appeared in many other networks too, hasn't he? But he's not getting any flack for that.
Well, I think the White House is forgetting the connection that Donna Brazile has to CNN, or what Van Jones was to the Obama administration getting paid by CNN. You can easily discredit someone if you want to follow the money.
Elsewhere, the Russian foreign minister has expressed suspicion that the seizure of the Syrian city of Palmyra by Daesh might have been staged. Sergei Lavrov says Daesh terrorists' advance to the ancient desert city may have been engineered by the U.S. and its regional allies to divert attention from Aleppo. Lavrov says the fall of Palmyra raises the thought that it has been all orchestrated to give retreating militants in Aleppo a break. The Takfiri terrorist group recaptured Palmyra over the weekend. Months after it was forced out of the city, Russia has already blamed the loss on the United States.
Over 4,000 Islamic State terrorists have launched this latest offensive to retake the ancient city. And Palmyra is not only a key Syrian city, it's also a symbolic city to Islamic State, because this was the group's former stronghold before the city was liberated in March this year. Now, according to the Russian military, the militants have regrouped in what is seen as a major push to re-enter the city, bringing considerable reinforcements, including heavy hardware from Liens, including tanks, as you can see here. It's believed the group is also receiving support from jihadists coming from neighbouring Iraq, particularly the city of Mosul here. Now, in the days leading up to this offensive, Russian intelligence uncovered how 5,000 IS militants from Mosul in Iraq, as well as from Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor in Syria, had moved closer to the city of Palmyra. So it seems the group has been advancing steadily towards the city over the past few days, while also reinforcing its numbers in Syria by transferring its fighters from Iraq. Now, Russia's Ministry of Defense has said that despite heavy losses in both manpower and military hardware, the group seems determined to regain a foothold in the city. And one of the reasons for this is that the Russian Air Force is not conducting airstrikes against residential areas in the city. So these suburbs could represent safe zones for the Islamic State group. Now, there are reports that civilians are being evacuated out of the city. Just reports at this point. We can't confirm this. But this latest push for Palmyra comes just 9 months after the city was liberated from the grip of jihadists, and after months of losses and setbacks across Syria, Iraq and Libya. Successfully regaining control of this city would be seen as a huge symbolic gain for Islamic State, not just in terms of territory, but also for the group morale.
The fighting may soon be over, but not the suffering of eastern Aleppo's citizens. Syrian regime forces have almost total control of the rebels' former territory.
The battle is at its end. Only 10% of eastern Aleppo remains in the rebels' hands.
But the Syrian interim government's deputy prime minister says the rebels will fight to the death rather than lay down arms.
It's like an apocalypse in Aleppo. People are helpless. We demand the international community secures a safe exit, supervised by the UN, for the civilians trapped there.
It's been a hard-fought campaign, and the regime has triumphed thanks to the support of fighters from Lebanese armed group Hezbollah and intense Russian airstrikes. But it's reduced the city.
It's our land, our soul. Aleppo City, for months it has been under siege. We are facing cold, hunger, and poverty. But we are worried about those children. We need someone to help us. We've only the mercy of God.
Emotions running high as Indonesia's big blasphemy trial got underway on Tuesday. Jakarta's Christian governor standing accused of insulting the Quran, a case seen as a test of religious freedom in the world's largest Muslim-majority country. Basuki Cahaya Purnama crying in court as he described a loving relationship with the Muslim parents who adopted him.
I am very saddened that I've been accused of insulting Islam because it's just like saying I despise my adoptive family.
Outside the courthouse, heavy security and protesters chanting God is great, demanding Purnama be arrested and put in jail. He made the comment about the Quran during a political campaign back in September, sparking the biggest protests Jakarta has seen in almost 20 years. But the city's first ethnic Chinese governor has his supporters too. He's won praise for trying to improve Jakarta's notorious traffic and shaking up its sleepy bureaucracy.
There's no case for this, yeah? But the haters, since 2014, before I inaugurated as a governor, these haters are always against Ahok.
The trial will pick up again next week. Purnama faces 5 years in prison if he's found guilty, and the odds seem stacked against him. Nearly all blasphemy cases over the past few years have ended in a conviction.
Hundreds of thousands of South Koreans are holding a demonstration for the 7th weekend in a row, calling for President Park Geun-hye's immediate resignation. Let's go live now to the South Korean capital. Now, these huge candlelit rallies have become the signature of a mass movement aimed at removing Park from office. Every Saturday for the past few weeks, people have surrounded Cheonggyecheong, a public recreation space in the center of Seoul, to call for Park's removal and prosecution. President Park is accused of allowing her close friend Choi Son-sil to use their relationship to peddle influence and meddle in state affairs. Choi is a shadowy billionaire and daughter of a cult leader, Choi Tae-min. The scandal has also implicated several large South Korean businesses such as Samsung and Hyundai.
Farasha Ahmed uses whatever she can to prepare some food for her family. But she's at a camp for internally displaced people outside Yemen's capital Sana'a. And she won't find much. A bit of rice is all she has to feed her 12 children.
Our houses are on the border with Saudi Arabia. They were hit. They destroyed our homes. We came here to Dharawan, and now we have nothing. Our children are ill. We're in the cold. No food, no bedding, no water. We only have God. We're waiting for any organization to look our way.
Farasha has been in the Dharawan camp for a year now. She shares this barren patch of land with around 450 families. Some try to have some semblance of normal life. This tent even tells passers-by that it's a home. But it does little to hide the desperation. The UN says the war has internally displaced more than 3 million Yemenis. Many have gone to ancestral villages or to live with their families. But in the Middle East's poorest country, many end up in camps.
It's a disaster here in the camp because of the cold, the rain, the infections that are spreading, especially among children. Our health is suffering. There's little food and water. We are ignored by aid organisations. They came 2 or 3 times, but since then we've been ignored.
Around half of Yemen's population are struggling to get food. And famine threatens 2 of Yemen's provinces.
Just a few weeks after a wall was built in a Munich suburb to separate a refugee centre from a housing estate, there are now calls for it to be knocked down. It was put up at the request of a group of residents who were concerned about noise from the refugees. From Munich, John Brain reports.
Preparing a welcome for refugees from war. When it's finished, this development on the outskirts of Munich will be home to 160 children. Less welcoming will be this, a 4-meter-high wall. Built at the request of some local residents, it will shield the nearby houses from the refugees and any noise they might make. This wall isn't just dividing the housing estate from the refugee site, it's also dividing the community between those who believe it serves a valuable purpose and those who feel the whole idea of a wall has unfortunate connotations in this country. For Frank McLean, the decision to build it represents a failure to understand history.
It sends out a horrible message about the area because you have to remember that the Berlin Wall came down, and almost on the anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down, this wall was completed here. And now Munich is the only city in Germany that has a wall which seems to be dividing the locals, the citizens, the inhabitants from the refugees who are coming in.
I think it was in the very worst moment when Trump was talking about building walls, and everybody is talking about building walls, and it was a very bad situation.
But other residents are angry at the way their wall has been portrayed in the media. They've got the support of the local council.
The decision was made by the court, which accepted the residents will suffer from noise pollution. There was no reaction until a video appeared on the internet, and then there was a wave of reaction with a lack of understanding about what was really happening.
A petition to have the wall torn down has been signed by 6,000 people. However, it's likely it will still be here by the time the last of the refugees arrive.
Traces of a 2011 disaster in Japan show up along the coast of the United States. Researchers say ocean water samples taken off Oregon's coast had cesium-134, known as the fingerprint of Fukushima, marking the first time the radiation has been detected on the U.S. West Coast. In March 2011, the biggest earthquake ever recorded in Japan triggered a massive tsunami that destroyed Japan's Fukushima nuclear power plant, sending contaminated water into the sea. More than 5 years later, it's made its way across the ocean.
Korea is implementing stronger measures to further contain the highly pathogenic H5N6 strain of avian influenza that is spreading across the country. The government's 48-hour standstill order issued on Monday goes into effect today to stop the movement of poultry, industry workers and equipment for decontamination procedures. In issuing the order, Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn had also pledged to increase support of the affected regions and stressed the need for greater information sharing among the central and local governments, farmhouses and experts. More than 12 million poultry have been culled since the outbreak began in mid-November. That is the most culled in the shortest period of time due to the AI virus, and is fast closing in on the 14 million birds culled in 100 days in 2014.
With the potential of harnessing clean, limitless energy, thermonuclear fusion is also known as the artificial sun. And this is one of the core components of this artificial sun. Independently invented by China, the scientific breakthrough has been authenticated by prestigious international organizations. A milestone contribution to this field of study.
The component we invented is one of the first of its kind in the world that has passed the International Cyclic Heat Test. It really means a lot.
Fusion occurs when two hydrogen nuclei merge to form an atom of helium. During the process, a small amount of mass is converted into an enormous amount of heat. Using the chemical element extracted from 1 liter of seawater, the technology can produce energy equivalent to that generated by burning 300 liters of gasoline. However, the huge energy that is output can also impose a challenge.
One of its biggest functions is to protect the other components of the devices from the huge energy produced from the fusion, and it ends up taking away some of the energy it produces.
China is the only nation in the world increasing its budget for fusion research. The funding and opportunities available in China have attracted fusion scientists from around the world.
If The claims of a 120-year-old man are true. There could be a link between celibacy and longevity. Swami Sivananda is a Hindu monk in India. His passport says he was born on August 8, 1896, and he says he's never needed a doctor. He credits his long life to yoga, food with no spices, no sex, and lots of discipline. He said, quote, "Control over your needs is the biggest gain in life." Born into poverty, he was taught to never desire too much out of life. Sivananda claims to have never slept in a bed or with a pillow in his life, just a jute mat on the floor and a stone to lay his head on. Now he says he's applying for the Guinness World Record for world's oldest man to make his fans happy. Local media says he attracts hundreds of visitors from all over India, giving interviews and performing lectures to fascinated crowds. The current record for oldest man is held by Japan's Jiro Imon Kimura. He died in June 2013 at the age of 116.
We are at war with Russia, or perhaps more correctly, we have lost a war with Russia without a battle. We are no longer a sovereign nation. We are no longer a democracy. We are no longer a free people. We are the victims of a bloodless coup, so far a bloodless coup, engineered by Russia with, at best, the traitorous indifference of the Republican Party and Donald J Trump, a man who, to borrow a phrase from another December long ago, will live in infamy. In 5 weeks' time, unless desperate measures are taken, we will hand over the government to a man who lost the popular vote.
Allegations of Russian interference in the U.S. election swirled throughout the campaign. A CIA report claims that Russian operatives hacked into Democratic Party emails and passed them on to WikiLeaks in an attempt to help Donald Trump win the presidency and hurt the chances of the Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton.
Former UK Ambassador Craig Murray said that he met the DNC hacker. He's a DC insider. He's not Russian. And he's calling bull on this whole assertion that the mainstream media has been saying for weeks on end that Russia hacked the DNC, all in an effort to help Donald Trump win the presidency. Now, this is what Ambassador Murray had to say. He said, "I've met the person who leaked them. They're certainly not Russian. It's an insider." He also points out that the DNC emails were leaked, not hacked, by this insider, who most likely was upset at Clinton and the DNC rigging the primary against Bernie Sanders. That falls in lockstep with any rational thought. And the fact that our own CIA, FBI, and National Director of Intelligence have conducted their investigation, and they're all saying, look, we believe the Russians hacked into our system, it's total nonsense and bull. There is a giant conspiracy going on right now, but that would be the conspiracy. Now, this is the same CIA that told us that we had weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which of course, then we invaded Iraq and toppled Saddam Hussein. The information that we're getting, we need to question it, and specifically these baloney claims that Russia hacked into our system. Where's the proof? You know, it's weird that the mainstream media is just running with it. No proof needed, actually, as long as, you know, you've got government officials that are saying it. We have a clear evidence here, this one ambassador who has credibility, and he's saying, look, I met the leaker. They're simply not Russian. He's calling bull on the whole thing.
The report has not been made public, but some U.S. senators were briefed on the intelligence earlier this week.
It said essentially three things. It said the Russians are behind this. Number two, the Russians are leaking it. Number three, it is intended to influence or interfere with our elections. And number 4, it was approved at the highest level of the Russian government. That is, I find it pretty